On this episode of Fitness Junkeez, my guest co-host Ron Hammet talks about the mind of an ultra racer and the reason why someone would want to run 30 100-mile races.
That's what my wife tells me. Like, we went for a 20-miler, and she's like, like a light run. She's like, that's not normal.
Later, we meet at Maximum Velocity Physical Therapy to go through the 3 core exercises that keep Ron running better.
What I want you to do is drive your knees out on the band and get your bottom to be about 2 inches below your knees. Now,
faster.
Don't bend your knees until the bar passes your knees. Hinge, bend, slight tap, and stand up tall.
And stronger.
Second. So we're looking for the bar to be directly on top of his shoulder blades and come on down.
So stay tuned and enjoy the show. What's up, Fit Fam? This is Giovanni of Gio's Logic and your host of Fitness Junkeez. And we're here. We have some really great guests today. And the topic is basically going to be longevity in your training. So one characteristic of a fitness junkie is that we're obsessed with the sport that we love doing or the exercise we love doing. I'm obsessed with the gym, and my guest co-host, Ron, is obsessed with ultra runs.
Yes.
How are you doing, Ron? Good. And my other guest, my health practitioner, who's also named Ron, is the guy behind the guy that keeps Ron running strong. How are you today, Ron?
Outstanding.
Awesome.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. So before we get into more of this topic, let's hear from you about your fitness journey. How'd you get into ultra running, and what is ultra distance running?
Yeah, so I guess ultra running is kind of defined anything 50K or greater, right? So 50K is 31 miles. So running 50K or more, and usually that's 50K, 50-miler, 100K, 62 miles, and 100-miler. And now they go on to 200-milers and 250-mile races, multi-day races. So it's anything beyond, you could say beyond a marathon, but usually it's above a 50K.
Got it. And I'm a trainer as well, and a lot of my clients come to me and go, I think I'm going to do a half marathon or a marathon. And I'm like, why? Do you love running? Like, why would you put yourself through that? And so I'm going to ask you, why and how did you get into...
The why is the best question. I mean, it is the why. So a lot of non-runners will ask me, because I primarily do 100-mile runs. That's my favorite kind of distance. And they ask me, like, why? Why do you do that? And I asked them, would you ever see yourself running that distance, or primarily the runs are on trails in the desert, in the forest, and like, does that excite you? And a lot of them will go, no. So that why is different. So my why, you have to see these places, and if you see people running, and if your clients come to you and they go, I want to do a half marathon, something has sparked them, something has kind of grabbed their attention. And everybody has their own why, so grabbing onto that and using that as a motivation for their training is important. My why came from, I was in my 30s, and one of those things where you have to do a marathon. One of those things you just have to do before you die.
Okay.
And I started training for it, and I remember one of the first memories, I ran 2 miles, and I had to go back home and sit in the bathtub and soak in cold water. I was so sore. I had no idea what I was doing. But that sparked me. I was like, this is going to be hard. So that training up until a marathon was eye-opening and painful, but at the end, very rewarding. And then I did a couple of more, and then somebody told me, there's races in the woods, in the forests. I'm like, that was my spark. It was like, wait, one thing I love to do is hiking, and you can run and see things that I would normally see in hiking as you race. I'm like, oh, and that was it. So once I started gathering research on that, I found a couple of races and did them, and I was hooked instantly. So for my why was I can go places and see things that most people don't see, some of the backcountry,
Right.
unless they're hiking, for days in there. And that has always excited me, kept me going. And plus the challenge of, doing these things and doing them in a decent time is always a challenge and fun.
And you're a svelte body. You're not a big guy like me. Is like, do you see like?
Oh, I see.
My experience with ultra runners is David Goggins, and that's where I kind of started even getting on the radar of what that was. And he's a pretty thick guy.
Oh, totally.
But is it easier for you, or?
Well, that's a funny topic. But the elite athletes in this sport, you'll see. I call them. They're definitely shorter and thinner, and I think they just have a nice body mass to strength ratio. There's an advantage. But in all distances of ultra running, you'll see big to small. They're all body types. And even my wife and child go to the races, and she'll note like, that person doesn't look like an ultra runner. I'm like, yeah, they're all body types. So
Right.
it's not regulated to the small and fit. It
Right.
could be. I've seen 6'5", 250 doing 100-miler.
And is it about finishing or winning with you?
Good question. So yes. So some races are finishing. Like I did one last weekend, and that was just kind of like, I just want to finish. I want to have fun. There was a lot of friends and from Las Vegas at this race. So sometimes finishing or perfecting the aspect of your training. So in this case, it was fueling. So fueling for that long is a major part of the sport. So perfecting that could be aspect, or just finishing, or maybe a time finish. Sometimes, yeah, you want to race.
Right.
Yeah, that's different. That's a different day.
Right. So, so you mentioned this thought of, I got to do a marathon before I die. I've never had that thought, but
Yeah.
was there health? Like, did you want to get healthier? Was there any other thing? It was just, I gotta run.
I'm sure I saw something or read something, and it's popped in my head, and it has to grab you. Like there is, for the ultra running part, for the 100-mile distance, there is this one race called Hard Rock 100. It's one of the hardest races in North America. I saw pictures of it, and it's in the high mountains of Colorado. It has, I think the average elevation is 10 or 11,000 feet that you're running at, and you climb 31,000 feet and you descend 31,000 feet throughout the race. And I saw pictures. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. It scared me to death. Still does, but it scared me to death, but it was enough that it just hooked me. So back to that why is, if something doesn't hook you, if this sport doesn't hook you, you're not gonna stay with it for a while, because it does take a lot of dedication, and it takes not years, but depending on the distance of the race, it takes a lot of time to kind of work up to that. So if that why doesn't just grab you and hook you, it's going to be really hard training those long miles to get there. So
My why is because I love to eat. But anyway, Ron, so I'd love to hear how you got into your specialty in physical therapy and your fitness journey. I'm sure you've had one as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Talk
Well,
about it.
if somebody shows up in my office with that as a goal, I want to be the guy that says, what plan do we have to execute that? And for me, the challenge of every day going to work is taking all kinds of different athletic history, all kinds of different medical history, and then correcting any impairments to reach that particular goal. Somebody who's never run comes to me with a 100-mile goal, that might be 2 years away. Somebody who says, like you, I want to run a 5K and I want to have like a presence about it. I don't want to just finish it and survive it. What kind of plan do we execute to be able to pull that off? So that's what I get to do every day is actually execute the plan that gets them there.
But let's go back further. Like, were you an athlete? How did you get into PT? And this specific PT is
Definitely
unique.
baseball.
Baseball.
Played tons and tons of baseball. And I remember being a young teenager, and it was right when those camcorders came out that had the viewfinder on the side.
Mm-hmm.
And I set that thing up and filmed myself hitting in the cage, and then go and review it and modify it and go make some changes and hit. And so as a teenager, I could watch anyone play and know exactly who it was just by the way that they move. How do they pitch? How do they hit? What are they doing with their hips? How do they hold the bat? Just that's really where my love of movement came on, and ended up playing a fair amount of baseball. And then if I couldn't continue playing baseball, I wanted to work with athletes. And so that essentially led me to physical therapy.
So your sports dream died, like mine.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
to be
I would
NFL
say
player.
ultimately I chose academia over junior college, chasing this dream of baseball where,
Right.
I didn't get a Division I
Scholarship.
right out the gate, and knew I was going to have to grind, and just decided to go straight to academia.
Well, I'm glad you did. I think you're glad he
Yeah,
did as
of
well,
course.
right? So, your facility, which is right next door to Sticky Paws, by the way, and it was different than what I was expecting for a physical therapy office. Briefly, kind of encapsulate what makes you different over there at MVPT.
What makes me different is, I would say, a traditional clinic is interested in checking off boxes for charges that they would bill their insurance for in order to make money. I'm actually trying to change the athlete as a person to get them to reach their goals. So I live in a place where the people are too healthy for formal physical therapy, but not necessarily fit or healthy enough to reach their goals. Those are very different subset of people. It's high-level orthopedics, but also performance-oriented physical therapy. So to my knowledge, I'm the only PT in town with racks and rigs and bumper plates and weightlifting platforms, because I'm actually trying to provide an adaptation that helps these athletes reach their goals, regardless of what sport or activity they choose.
Yeah, that's really great, because that's what I was like. Wow, this is a gym like over here. So back to the mind of an ultra runner. You talked about wanting it and like seeing a run and going, I really want that. That's my why. That's my driver. But like, aren't you guys a little crazy?
Yeah, in the best of ways.
Right.
We've had this discussion before where there's a difference between like triathletes and marathoners, classic marathoners, and trail runners or ultra runners. Just an attitude. I mean, trail runners tend to be extremely friendly, fairly laid back. Even the elite on the top, and these are amazing people. I mean, they're doing 100-mile mountainous runs in 14, 15 hours. It's insane. But all of them tend to be very relatable, very friendly. It's a very family-oriented sport. That's why I like it. We can go to places. And
So talk about what kind of pace that is. So if you run
for that elite athlete,
Yeah.
what is that? 8 or 9s?
8 or 9 minute miles over 100 miles. That's what
Going
we're
up,
talking about.
some of these races going up 20,000 feet, down 20,000 feet. These are the elite. These are just aliens. They're
Right.
amazing.
And if you see them at the grocery store, you won't even know who they were,
No.
and they'll just be the happiest, friendliest guy.
Just trail gods walking around with their mere mortals. But it's a very family-oriented bunch. So I like taking my wife and my daughter to these places, and their races you can go to, and you start at a park maybe, or in national park, and you kind of hang out with the people. My wife has gained friends just by hanging out during races. So
it's a community. Sounds
totally
like.
a community.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, because I have a coach for Sundog Running, one of the things I like to tell some of my clients is have a support system. So it can be a family. My family is a huge support system for me, or having that trail group, having those local runners around you that motivate you or push you. In Las Vegas, we've grown. 5 years ago there was very few ultra runners, and nowadays, last weekend we had one person do their first 100, another person do their first 50 miler. So just in our town, it's exploded, and not just in numbers, but in the distances and the quality of runner, because of that trail family support.
So tell me a little bit more about your Sundog running program. Is that anybody can join, or?
Yeah, so this is a camp based out of Flagstaff, Arizona. It's headed by Ian and Emily Torrance, and another coach called Eric Sensman. These are elite runners in the sport. If you know anything about the sport, you'll know these names.
Got it.
Ian coached me, and he was my mentor for a while. And I was lucky enough to join their crew to help coach. But yeah, anybody can go to your website, sundogrunning.com, and we handle clients from any distance, half marathon, all the way up to 100 milers. And we all have our kind of specialties.
Got it. And what's yours?
My niche, so family life, right? So people who have families, kids, jobs, finding time is huge. Then finding time to train for these big events becomes an issue. So that's kind of my background, and finding the most efficient way to train for these longer distances. I've kind of mastered. And a lot of the strength training, going back to Ron, I have found strength training can really reduce the amount of, so I should back up. Depending on the goal of the athlete, if it's back to like, I just want to do a 50 miler, I want to do a 100 miler. Introducing strength training can really reduce the amount of weekly mileage you would need to train for these events. Therefore, it saves time also, and it prevents injury, and it makes you more efficient. There's a lot of benefits to strength training for these ultra runs. But weaving those into a family life and a work life and that kind of idea, that's where I like specializing in people who are busy in families and they have other lives, but yet they want to do these epic events.
I absolutely love that strength training is part of ultra running.
Yeah.
At least as your experience is the top of the cream of the crop do strength training.
Yeah, they're doing both. They're the cream of the crop. They're doing heavy volume and strength training. They're doing everything right.
I wouldn't even have thought that until yesterday. I wouldn't even have thought that ultra runners, other than maybe David Goggins, but he's so unique, that would even like do heavy squats. Like that kind of blew my mind.
Well, that's talking about going to physical therapy. That's my introduction to physical therapy in the past was, like I told you yesterday, I've had 2 orthopedic surgeons tell me I've never run again because of injuries to my knees. And it wasn't until I found a good strength-based PT that go, oh, no, you just have a muscle imbalance or something is weak. Let's address that. Let's address your issue with strength. And right after that, then that's 10 years ago, and another one was 7 years ago. So that's when I learned that, okay, find a good PT that addresses injuries or prevention with strength training. And with that, I found that, I can reduce my mileage by a certain amount. I'm not as injured as much. I'm more efficient because my muscles are working better and more concert with other muscles. So that's when it really started snowballing. So having somebody as a reference or as a resource is instrumental, at least in this sport.
I'm, in general, over the last, I'd say 20, 30 years, how much resistance training and strength training is coming into all sports. Like years ago, it was like, oh, you're a basketball player, you can't do any weights.
Yeah,
like,
It'll make you slower.
right.
Yeah.
Do you find that as well?
100%. I mean, ultimately, I had to leave my profession to find out exactly why these other realms of coaches are outperforming PT. The CrossFitters, the strength and conditioning coaches, you know, I went to some really big name continuing education courses to learn something outside of what's taught in my profession in order to be able to execute some of the care that I give to some of my athletes.
Yeah. And we'll get into that a little bit later.
Do you find that some of your clients that go into running, some of your longer last, or your clients have been with you for a while that want to do a half marathon, or do you see their success? Do you think there is on your side, on your angle, see that, oh, these people that are coming from strength and then they take on the running sport, do they tend to be successful in that?
See, I believe most of the people that come to see me want to lose weight. So I'm very much like you. I teach a whole life kind of concept, you know, like you have to balance all the balls. So most of my clients, I believe, see the marathon or half marathon as a goal that they can use to help them keep on track with their program along with the weight training. So I don't really know how much, I know it helps, but I don't know how much it helps as far as them succeeding on a higher level because of the weight training.
I see.
Yeah. But I do believe there's a lot of similarities between elite athletes, or should I say elite weekend warrior athletes that are doing a race or a bodybuilding competition or something to, you know, push their body composition to a better place. And we were talking yesterday about it, that when you hit that mark, you go on stage, you win a medal for your body, or you finish a 100-mile race, that post-race depression that they get, it can really be pretty dramatic. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah. When I first started doing races, especially the longer races, you'd come home, you'd say you just went there to finish. So you'd finish this, you'd kind of climb that mountain, you'd finish, and you would come home, and I found myself a little depressed, a little like lackluster, we'll say, and something I didn't talk about, and, you know, like kind of kept it low until I had a buddy who's another runner, and he goes, you know, post-run depression's a real thing. I was like, oh, so once you kind of identify, you're like, oh, yeah, you're right. And it wasn't just, and I found it's two things. I think it's just the chemical, what your body has gone through, and it has to recoup, and just the chemistry of it, but also not having another goal. So a lot of runners will tend to have these big goals, you know, and they accomplish it, and they meet it, and they go home, and they're like, oh, that's it. You know, that there's nothing on the horizon.
Right.
So what I learned is to identify that you will feel a little bit, you know, depressed for a little bit, a couple of days. But it was also nice to have a goal or goals ahead of you to look forward to kind of like, you know, kind of keep your head up and go, okay, it's coming. So it wasn't, not having that in the future was kind of just kind of, you know, your vision gets really small around you. But once you kind of have something in the future, you can kind of start looking out, and, you know, your attitude kind of changes. So, you know, adapting to the chemistry of it, let alone the emotional and mental aspect, having, you know, little tricks to fool yourself. That's what I tend to do now, and have other clients do.
Tricks are important. They really are.
Yeah.
There's a lot of similarities of what you're doing as far as your coaching, and I always teach, like, you gotta have another goal set up already
Totally.
while you're pursuing the
Completely.
first one. Otherwise, you can really fall off track. I've heard stories of bikini bodybuilders, specifically women, because they're already so objectified by their bodies that they go through a serious dieting, and it's a really hardcore road to competing, and they are just torn up afterwards. It's like, then they refeed and they eat a bunch of junk, so then they gain it like 15, 20 pounds, and it can be a real mess if you don't have the proper coaching to help them prepare for what's going to come next. So it was really interesting that we have similar philosophies about that, even completely different worlds.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And we're assuming that they would do well. So you have instances where you don't finish a race. So imagine that. So there's one thing to finish a race and go, oh, I did my, I completed my goal. That's amazing. And then kind of watch the decline of your emotional state. But what if you did not finish the goal? That you failed, or DNF'd, it's called, to do not finish your race. Now you have to rally. So not having those goals ahead of you, or back to a support system, having family or trail family or running family to kind of pick you back up and let's go,
Right.
Go again. So yeah, you can find yourself spiraling down.
Right. And it's with these bikini bodybuilders, it's really harsh, when you're on stage just being judged by your body, not any run or any physical game that you played. So if they don't get called out in this first judging round, so you don't even get to the real show.
Mm-hmm.
We don't even want to see you. So just imagine that you spend 12 weeks, 4 months getting ready for the show, and you don't even make it to the show. You get called out, and then what's next? Where's your self-esteem? If you don't have someone, you don't have the support system. I always tell my clients that are trying to do that, it's like, you've got to know that you're doing this for your health. You're doing this for, because it's exciting. You can't be tied into that result, or if you don't get that result, you're going to be through. So,
and plus the judging is all subjective, right? So
Yeah.
it's a panel of judges at that time.
Mm-hmm.
At least with racing, you're challenging the elements in the mountain,
Right.
or the trail.
You against the clock.
Yeah, so you can actually compete against yourself.
Right.
So a lot of ultra running a lot of the runners are just competing their last time, or they're trying to better themselves a little bit, or even though you do compare yourself to other runners, you have to, right?
Human nature.
Human nature. But I would imagine that sport, those girls are going in is just
Yeah, I mean, and the guys too, but it's the, women just in general are so, objectified, and it's so about their looks. So you've got to really be careful just on your emotional side when you get into that space. Speaking about what it does to your body, and again, my reference is David Goggins and the stories of him shitting himself and all his injuries, and it's just crazy.
You can never avoid talking about shitting without talking about ultra running. That's hilarious.
Is that a
No,
thing?
it's a thing.
It's definitely a thing.
Every group run, if at one point of this group run, or you're running with a friend, if the conversation doesn't turn towards relieving yourself, it's not a proper run, because it's always stories. Yeah.
Got it.
It's a natural laxative.
Okay.
So just by being out there, and just the activity itself is a bit of a laxative. So every runner has stories of having to find a bathroom in a hurry if they run road, or if you're out there on a trail, you find a bush.
The proper term is code brown.
Code Brown.
You have
Nice.
30 seconds. Go
Nice.
find a spot.
Nice. But okay, so we've talked about a little bit about the mental anguish of not finishing or finishing and not having goals. Like you just did 100-miler, right? How many days ago?
On Friday, so
And
so
a week ago.
7 days ago, yeah.
And you did a light 7-mile run yesterday to loosen up. And you look and seem like you're pretty in good condition, but what are some of the damages that happen to distance runners like that? Like
Damage, I think, is a funny word. I wouldn't use the word damage, but we're talking about, especially to dovetail off the A-race 100-mile first time, we're talking about physical stress, emotional stress, metabolic stress, hormonal stress. So it's a tremendous amount of stress on our body. And if we've spent, some of these cases are years or 2 years to develop the running prowess to be able to complete an activity like that. So, his body still, is trying to figure out calories, still trying to figure out sleep, still trying to figure out waking and sleeping. So, just that 24 hours has a major impact on all those systems.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and if all through after that race, there's sleep issues. There's, at least for me, like I'll eat a meal and then be instantly on the couch. I'm just
Asleep?
no, just really just
Oh.
just crashing to feel good, and then crashing to feel good, and then as the days go on, that kind of levels out. That's what yesterday was for me. It was like, okay, I'm pretty good, but your body's going through some big changes, and it's trying to catch up.
And the thing we have to remember is that he's run 30 times 100. So somebody that's their first attempt at 100, the swings are bigger. So the curves are bigger.
Yeah.
So
And what
his body's used to that.
And that's what I've found is strength training allows your body to, for lack of a better term, like take the abuse, right? It's prepared for those forces that running is going to throw at you, especially if you're, again, it's not on a flat road level. These can be climbing up mountains and down mountains, so you're taking pounding that way. So strength training allows your body to mitigate the damage that's going to occur. Besides more efficiency, there's a lot of reasons to do strength training. Even just getting older, just strength training is phenomenal. But I
like how you referenced me getting.
I was doing this. It was more like
Okay.
us. Like, and we're in their 40s. The strength training has allowed people do it, take the abuse. So now recovery seems faster. So it's not recovery's faster, but your body has absorbed it enough where it could take that those issues and not be so traumatic. I mean, literally, I tell some of my runners, it's like a slow car wreck. Like if it's a 100-mile event, it's like being in a car wreck, but just spread over hours at a time, because the trauma is very similar when you get back. Your feet are banged up. You might lose toenails. You're in pain in every dimension of your body, and it comes out in phases as the days come. As you recover. And some of those issues they could be really deep. It could be a tendon that's a little weak that you don't feel. So really taking it easy after these long events is really important. Or listening. That's one thing, especially in ultra running or trail runners, the ability to listen to your body and to really honestly listen to it, and not be so caught up on, okay, I got to get back and train. It's social media is gonna, if I don't train, then my friends won't think I'm, whatever, that social pressure.
Right.
Is really listen and really allow your body to rest and recover. And it could be swimming, could be biking, could be some maybe non-impact, but doing something is important, but not just getting back out there and banging out again.
Which brings me back to the question, why? So the runner's high, those endorphins,
Go away really quickly.
they go away?
Totally.
Oh, wow.
No, if I tell people never, I think, what's the expression? Never make a decision uphill. So like when you're going up, you're in a race and you're going up a hill, it's like, I'm never going to do this race again. I'm done with this sport. I'm like, never make a decision. It's kind of like a life decision. Like when you're in trouble, just calm down, let it pass, and then make a decision, right? Everybody's gone through a race and they're like, this is too painful. I do not want to do this again. I don't know why I'm doing this. They question. They like, I want to see my kids. They're calling out for every source of help. And then they get done. And 2 days later, they're signing up for another race. It's that either you forget, the pain makes you forget what you just went through. But that's the draw. It's like, I did something hard. The pain I'm feeling now is almost a reward. You felt like you accomplished something. And it is a journey throughout every race. It's a journey.
And I could have done this better. I could have done that better. And next time, if I fix all those problems, I'll do much better.
So, yeah. And if you have that mindset, like I can do this better, then that it's a good spiral.
Snowballs.
Yeah. Snowballs in a good way.
Totally.
Opposed to like, I'm done. And that could be it. Like that's what I think some marathoners will do a marathon and like, I'm done. That wasn't for me.
Yeah. So the runner's high is a physiological phenomenon. It's not like a myth.
Right.
So if your cadence is at 180, 90 beats per minute on each leg, something in our brain triggers the centers of pleasure. So if you're one of those people who say, oh, I've never got that runner's high, it's usually because you haven't worked on the skills of running enough to be able to reach that particular level of efficiency so that thing gets clicked.
Got it.
So that's physiological.
Yeah. I mean, and I joke, but like during a race, you'll feel many highs and you'll feel many lows. With experience, you know that when you're in a low point, there will be a high point. And then when you're in a high point, try to do everything you can to lessen that low, but it's coming. So it's kind of, again, another life lesson of how are you going to handle it? How are you going to address the issue when you're low? And then when you get back up, when you kind of figure out the problem and you get back up to high, you feel good. You have a kind of a runner's high and you're feeling good. Know that that low might come again, but it's okay. And then just doing that over and over and over will get you to the finish line. So I think sometimes people will use these races as kind of like motivation for life. Like they can accomplish something in a small period of time, and that can relate to larger, life things.
Yeah.
But those little accomplishments are very addicting, and it is seemingly intense, during the times, or can be. But that little discomfort in that kind of short amount of time does have rewards.
And when you say short amount of time, how long does it usually take?
Well,
on average,
these could be races from half. It all depends on the athlete, right?
The 100 mile ones. On the average, like
on the average, and it all depends.
2 days.
No. So it depends on the terrain. So some races are flat. You can have a race that's 5 20-mile loops on a flat-ish course. You could have races that are point to point, 100 miles. You're at maybe 9,000 feet elevation, but cumulatively you'll gain 20,000 feet, and maybe you'll go down 15,000 feet. So imagine that experience opposed to just kind of running in circles. And that will vary the duration of that race, right? So you can have elites doing 14-hour, 100 milers, crazy. My slowest race was 43 hours.
43 hours.
Yeah. So,
Did you sleep?
No, and that's always the good question. Like during these races, in theory, you shouldn't sleep, because I think the average is around like 25 to 30 hours. We'll say. You shouldn't sleep. There's aid stations along the way, and you can probably take a little bit of a rest, like sit down and as you gather food and water. But you don't sleep. Yeah, you want to keep on moving. That's the
right.
Yeah, you want to kind of. It's called beware the chair. Like you don't even want to sit down and keep on keep on going.
That's great.
So that's why it's the longer races can be fairly intense.
Well, and if that's not enough, there are some races where it's 1 mile loop times 100.
Yeah, that's
right. That's what I think I saw David Goggins do one on the track, and that's when he shit himself.
Yeah. So 1 mile loop 100 times. That's That's a whole different mental animal.
Right. You're not getting the scenery and all
That
the
is not my
beauty.
why. That is not my why. No way.
So each show I have my guest host take me through a few of his favorite or her favorite workouts, one for upper body, core, and lower body. So we met over at Ron's place next door to see what Ron picked for his lower body exercise. So let's take a look at what we did yesterday.
I think if we go to your average gym, we're gonna find squats that look very similar to this. So keep your toes facing forward, and I want you to drive your knees straight forward towards the mirror. So this is what I would call a squat that's perpendicular to the mirror. Up you go. I think that's not the best way to squat if you're gonna do something like running. So if we put this band above your knees, turn your toes out about 30 degrees. And what I want you to do is drive your knees out on the band and get your bottom to be about 2 inches below get your bottom 2 inches below your knees. So drive your knees out and up nice and tall. So the difference between this squat and the other squat is anatomical. So in the first squat, the way that the acetabulum, the socket part of your hip is oriented is your bone kind of butts up against that. So by swinging your toes out and driving your knees apart, you get the acetabulum you get the femur to be able to pass inside the acetabulum. You can reach a deeper depth, and you can call in glutes more. So by pushing your knees apart, you're able to access the muscles that we use during running. And one of the really common biomechanical errors that we make as we get tired, I call it Pinocchio syndrome, is where you kind of start to get forward flexed, knees start to knock. So if we're squatting with the knees out, we sort of develop the strength to stop from falling into that position. So when he gets underneath the barbell, he's gonna take that squat with him.
Got it.
So feet are about shoulder width apart. Turn your toes out about 30 degrees. Drive your knees apart and squat with your bottom 2 inches below your knees. Come here, buddy. And so you'll see when people in the gym are starting to get above their ability is when they go from the hold to the top, they lose that knee position. So as soon as your knees crash, what you're doing is you're winding up your connective tissue and utilizing that tension to try to stand up. So that load at that point is not being driven by something dynamic, it's being driven by something static that will not show up in performance. It has to be dynamic.
So you haters out there know that Ron had just run 100 miles 5 days before that. That was why there was no weights on that bar.
You said you're going to edit some weights in there for me.
In post. Wow. Yeah, I have so many questions about your squat philosophy. I noticed the other day, but I noticed again, you weren't wearing any shoes. And is that part of it?
I wouldn't say that I direct him not to wear shoes,
Okay.
but I definitely don't love big, cushy shoes on the platform.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes I have my clients put a thin weight under their heel as well. Is that throwing their whole...
Yeah, I don't love that. The whole reason why that works is because you're basically fudging their connection to their glutes. So if I'm trying to teach him to utilize his glutes during squat, and then I do something that makes it easier, that's not going to happen when he actually utilizes it, there's no motor learning there. It doesn't connect. So, if he accesses a really full depth squat and he falls back, let him fall back. He's got to learn to accept the load with his glutes, and his brain is trying to figure out how many muscle fibers should I utilize to be able to get to that place. And that learning is valuable. And if I put something underneath his heels, he's going to lose that.
And is that a overactive tibula? The front, is that it's too tight? Why do people kind of? I see a lot of people doing it, and like I said, some of my clients do it as well.
Overactive.
Why do they? Is that part of that's not keeping them in their form or needing?
I mean, it could be. It could be.
Yeah.
I mean, I definitely have ankle patients squat, plantar fasciitis patients squat.
So I guess it varies.
It varies, and you know the whole reason why we get some of these foot problems is because we can't control our hip over our knees, and if you're abnormally loading your arch because you don't have the hip and knee control, then doing something like putting the plates underneath your heels is preventing that chain from learning how to work together. And so I don't love that.
And then the last thing was I guess most people are like, feet straight ahead, align with your hips, and you're the opposite. And we talked about how a baby would squat.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so you say no to aligned feet.
Absolutely.
To activate the glutes, which is what you're trying to do.
Exactly. So the people who are coming to me are trying to perform better. So if the ground is in the same place every time, and I teach their hip and knee to interact with the ground better, that's going to translate to better performance. So running, jumping, cutting are hip over knee oriented activities, and squat mechanics are running mechanics, are cutting mechanics. And if I can utilize glutes to do the squat and then do another activity that connects the squat to the activity that they're doing, then their brain sort of fills in the right gaps. If I just leave that to chance and I train them with a more quad-oriented squat and a less glute-oriented squat, then that squat doesn't connect to training, and that's when they can get themselves in trouble.
Interesting.
So it becomes a static activity in the gym that doesn't translate to a dynamic activity when they perform.
So you had some great philosophies, and I forget whether we taped them or not, but you're coming in there to be a better, stronger runner.
Well, this brings up a good point. The reason I came to him is, and this is years of issues where in the past was those orthopedic surgeons said you'll never run again because your knee's not working. It really came down to my right glute not behaving correctly, right? It didn't have that full the full it all come together, and when running it wasn't working. Wasn't firing and just enough where it was causing injuries. So this is the first time where I'm doing and it was during kind of COVID, so all the races are kind of canceled. So it was a good time to kind of go to basics. So getting that glute to fire correctly, in a proper format, and then express that. And that's what we recently I'm working on, is expressing that strength I've gained while I run. Because there was a time where I was super strong in the gym, but I wasn't applying that when I ran. So now I can feel that strength coming. I can feel it in the fact that of like going downhill, I feel more control. Some people tend to be a little antsy when they're running downhill, but now things are I can feel my quads engage, where my right quad was smaller than my left quad. So now I can start feel as I activate my glute, my whole leg is feeling its ability to take that load and not shifting it over to something else. So now I can feel that with that feedback of, it's coming online again. And that injury that I had, a year ago is almost gone. So, but that took a little bit, and it was because it was that was years of this issue, probably like 5 or 6 years of having this issue and being able to run with it. With a certain amount of strength, you can kind of run over these things. But now finally addressing that connection has made a big difference.
Awesome. So our next exercise was normally one that I would dedicate to the core, but Ron had a different philosophy on core work. Let's see what the other exercise we chose.
So for the deadlift, I essentially break down people into two different movement patterns, A, squat pattern, and B, a hinge pattern. So if you can access your hinge, athletically you can do some things like kettlebell swings, box jumps. Those are all hinge patterns. If we utilize the squat pattern to do those, that's how we get injured. So one thing that we really work on here is our hinge pattern. So Ron's gonna address the bar. Let's have your feet about shoulder width apart. I want your shins to be about 1 inch away from the bar. And I want all the motion to come from your hips. Hinge down, get your hands as close to the bar as you can, just let them fall naturally. Now bend your knees to get the rest of the direction, and we need your back to be nice and flat here. Drag the bar up your shins and stand up tall. Now, don't bend your knees until the bar passes your knees. Hinge, hinge, bend, slight tap, and stand up tall. And that's deadlift. Hinge, bend, light tap. Really common deadlift error is to initiate the movement with a knee bend first and then hinge down. You essentially squatted that deadlift. So squatted deadlifts hurt your back. Hinge deadlifts do not.
That was a big bang, anyway.
That's the wind.
Yeah, that was funny. So you had a formula and a philosophy on core work, a formula of how much you should be able to squat, how much you should be able to deadlift,
Yeah.
and how those two exercises are really large part your core work.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that unidimensional core exercises are not the same way we would utilize our core if we're performing. If we're performing, say, soccer, baseball, basketball, running, the core basically serves as a corset. It's squeezing, it's holding your center of gravity as stable as you can so your limbs can work. So if we use unidimensional action, not necessarily tapping into the same way that it performs. So I think barbell activities are the best way to teach people how to use their core, especially a deadlift. Anybody who comes for lower back pain leaves with a heavy deadlift for that reason. The counterbalance to the deadlift is back stability. And that's usually why they're reporting for back pain. So we use a ton of deadlift in the clinic.
And what was your formula, your weight?
We should be able to deadlift 20% more than your body weight. You should be able to squat your body weight and push press 70% of your body weight. And those are, I would consider 8 years old, 80 years old. I don't care what you do, who you are. That's human basics.
So I was thinking about what you do over there and putting into concepts that I understand. And if I had someone ask me, well, what? I didn't really get it. I would say what you do over there is functional physical therapy.
100%. Yeah.
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 You're working and strengthening the body how the body needs to be strengthened.
I think one thing I said yesterday was there's nothing better from the outside in than from the inside out. And I think in traditional medicine, we try to do so many things to the body to make it heal, but they're never as good as the body healing itself. And so what I try to do is come up with interventions that challenge and force adaptation so that the person can heal from this tendon problem, from this joint problem, and not try to do something to the outside in, which, you know, there's mountains and mountains and mountains of evidence that show us that they're just as good as placebo.
Right.
So let's actually change the body, force an adaptation, teach them how to interact with the ground better, and they don't have the same symptoms and perform at a much higher level.
Awesome. So the last part of the body we focused on was upper body. So let's see what the Ron's cooked up for upper body.
So I usually say push press is to the shoulder what squats are to the hip and knee. So if we can't put anything heavy above our head, that can become a problem. I mean, we would never do a workout, we would never do rehab for knee without doing squat. So I don't know why we don't do heavy things above our head. So we take a narrow approach to the bar. So just put your hands right on the inside of the grip. Unrack the bar, put it right in front of your chest. Now we'll use a real small dip. Push the bar above your head. And hold that there just for a second. So we're looking for the bar to be directly on top of his shoulder blades and come on down. We want to take the tip of your nose off as you go all the way up top, just like that. Elbows locked, big reach.
The core exercises are right here that we just did.
Right.
Is that like?
I would say those three exercises are the primary goal of everybody who walks in the door. I have those as a resting place for everybody who walks in the door. The process to get there and the process to do that correctly against a load is really the process of making, fitness junkies healthy and stress resistant so that they can go and do the things they want to do.
Love it. That's awesome. Can't wait to pick your brain.
Yeah.
It's good stuff. So, let's pick some more of that brain of yours.
Yeah.
So, those three movements are the core of functional living, basically, and then performing at a higher level if you're an ultra runner or if you're a bodybuilder or if you're a sport athlete. And I think the more exotic weight training and Instagram training is, we get away from these core exercises.
Absolutely. Makes me nuts.
Yeah. And where CrossFit, I think, has some limitations as well, what you're doing, I think, is really important.
I say every day, are you exercising or are you training? Are you exercising or are you training? Just doing something to bring on a sweat doesn't necessarily mean you're going to train better. Like Bosu balls and battle ropes and, I don't have any of that. The ground is in the same place every time. And if you don't learn to interact with the ground, you're not going to be able to perform at your best. So, you probably saw, what's his name from the Titans recently. Just everyone's talking about the exercise he posted where he's got his hands on a band and he's got a chain around his neck and his feet are on a ball and he's doing push-ups.
Oh, is it The Rock? No, not The Rock.
No, the Derrick Henry for the Tennessee Titans.
Oh, okay.
So he's doing push-ups on a band with a chain around his neck and his feet on a ball.
Right.
And I'm like, who cares? Who cares? None of that matters to anything. And that's the type of thing that makes me nuts as a person who sits in a place who helps people perform at a high level. I don't know why we're doing silly things like that. Makes me nuts.
I call it WTF.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
And for me, it's back to efficiency of time. Like if you have a limited amount of time during the day or week, and a lot of these things are distractions, I think. I mean, hitting that's why I like coming to his facility because it's core. I can knock it out in theory fairly quickly without gabbing. And know I'm getting highly functional training for my events, and it's with a limited amount of time. So I'm not having to go to the gym because I go there twice a week. I don't have to go to the gym every day, and it's now down to like an hour and a half, per once or twice per week is way more efficient than having to go to the gym every day, or spending time at home trying to do stuff. And
Right.
even though I do stuff at home, of course, but it's more time with the family. So more time with the family, the better. The happy the family, the more that feedback into my running. So there is a kind of a connection there. But I have a couple clients that have just had their new babies. So imagine their time crunch. So instead of them running 70 miles a week, if I can say, you could go to the gym twice a week, hour at a time, and we're going to reduce your mileage down to 40. And I'm sure their wives will be a little more happier with them, spending more time at home with the newborn. So I like the time efficiency of it because I can feel it on especially the longer runs. It's time well spent. It's just a quality. The quality of it is way greater than just time on feet. Again, as you want to progress in your training and get faster and faster, it depends on your goals. You're going to have to do both. I mean, volume does make for a better runner, but for the majority of runners getting into the sport, having a strength background is for me, especially at first with new athletes, having 8 to 12 weeks of strength, I value more than run training, because I know eventually as that transformation takes hold, I can add more running to it without fear of them breaking down or the ill effects of large volumes, because now their body can handle it, and that makes them more successful in their races, and it makes so it snowballs to a higher probability of success. So that's what I like. So I'm all about, especially at first, foundation of strength, and then we can apply running slowly. And watching clients understand or realize when those things mesh together, and like if they had an injury or they're just something was wrong, but they can feel they're absorbing the runs training more. They're not as banged up when they come home or tired. They're hungry. That's one of the signs I see when the strength training and run training come together. On their feedback to me, like, I want to run more, or they run more. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Because I feel really good. I feel really strong. I'm like, okay, those things have come together. So let's take it to the next level. So that's what I like seeing.
Sounds like the bliss point where everything's coming together.
Yeah, opposed to like a lot of that. I mean, when I started marathon training, I've had, you start training, you go online and you get that marathon training, and within 2 months I was injured. So, because I had zero strength. So now applying strength, then applying running, the injuries will be less frequent, we'll say. Things will come up, and it won't be as severe. That's another thing. You might have a severe injury opposed to, something's wrong. Let me examine it or do some extra work on it, or that kind of idea. So there's just a huge benefit just in running, let alone time savings.
So Ron, where can other runners that are either thinking about it or wanting to get into the longer distance running, how can they get in contact with you and your group?
Sundogrunning.com.
Okay.
You can go there to the site and see us and our coaches, or email me at ron@sundogrunning.com
Okay.
directly.
And Ron, how do people get in touch with you? And I know you don't just do running. Maybe tap into what all the things you do help people with, and how do they get in contact with you?
I mean, I have 80-year-old, older woman who lives by herself and, needs to be able to take her own groceries in her house and still clean her house and climb stairs, all the way to 8-year-old phenom golfer who, wants to have longevity in the sport. So like anything in between, anybody injured or looking for any performance and have something missing. maxvelocitypt.com is my website. There's a blog associated with that. You could call me at the clinic. You can email me.
You guys do a podcast as well, right?
And we have a podcast called Hyperspeed Radio.
Okay.
So originally Hyperspeed was an elite triathlon team that I coached that were all youth. And so I wanted to keep that sort of brand alive. So I modified the Hyperspeed logo to put some headphones on it and continue with that sort of legacy. And then Ron and I get on there probably 2 or 3 out of 5 of my podcasts. I just did one on stretching. And then the one before that, Ron and I talked about the importance of pre-run activities. And he sort of took a coach's point of view, and I took a PT/coach point of view and talked about the importance of pre-race activities to enhance performance.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for your time today. This was great.
Thanks for having us. It was a blast.
I learned a lot. I'm still going to pick your brain. I'm glad you're next door.
Anytime, man. I'd love to share anything.
Awesome. Yeah. And thank you all for watching or listening. And remember to like, share, and write a review. And remember that once you get hooked on this content, the body you desire and the health you deserve are not far away. I'm out, Fit Fam.